The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered general store, and Delilah Chandler stepped down onto the dusty street of San Francisco, California, clutching nothing but a small cloth bundle that contained everything she owned in this world. It was September 1869, and the salty breeze from the bay carried with it the scent of fish, smoke, and possibility, though Delilah felt none of the hope that should have accompanied a new beginning. Her dress, once a respectable shade of gray, had been mended so many times that patches covered patches, and the hem was brown with road, dust, and age. Her boots had holes worn through the soles, and she could feel every stone beneath her feet. The bonnet on her head had lost its shape months ago, and auburn hair escaped in wild tendrils around her face, which was sunburned and smudged with travel grime. She stood there on the boardwalk, clutching her bundle, and looked around at the bustling port city that would be her new home. San Francisco was nothing like the quiet farming community in Ohio where she had grown up. Here, buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high, painted ladies called from saloon doorways, and men of every nationality hurried past on unknown errands. Ships crowded the harbor, their masts creating a forest of timber against the gray sky. Somewhere in this chaos was the man who had sent for her, Warren Oakley, a cattle rancher who needed a wife and had promised her a home in exchange for companionship and help running his household. Delilah had answered his advertisement out of sheer desperation. After her father died of fever and creditors took their farm, she had been left with nothing. Her only living relative, an aunt in Pennsylvania, had made it clear there was no room for Delilah in her crowded home. The choices had been stark. Find work in a factory where girls lost fingers to machines and lungs to lint, accept a position in a brothel where the madam promised good money for pretty girls, or take a chance on a stranger who at least offered respectability. She had chosen the latter, selling what few possessions she had to pay for the journey west, arriving with literally nothing but the clothes on her back and 50 cents in her pocket. A man approached her, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. His boots were well-worn but sturdy, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew his place in the world. When he got close enough, Delilah could see his face clearly. He was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes the color of whiskey in lamplight. There was a kindness in those eyes that made something tight in Delilah's chest loosen just slightly. "Miss Chandler." His voice was deep and steady, with a hint of something warm underneath the practical tone. "Yes." Her own voice came out smaller than she intended, and she cleared her throat. "Mr. Oakley," he nodded, and his gaze moved over her, taking in the state of her clothing, the worn boots, the too thin frame that spoke of meals skipped and hardship endured. Delilah braced herself for disappointment, for the change in expression that would tell her he found her lacking, that he had expected someone better, someone who at least looked presentable. She had seen that look before, in the eyes of shopkeepers who watched her carefully to make sure she did not steal, in the faces of former neighbors who whispered behind their hands about the Chandler girl who had fallen so far. But Warren Oakley's expression did not change to disappointment. Instead, something softened in his features, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "You have had a long journey." It was not a question, but Delilah nodded anyway. "Yes, sir, nearly 3 weeks. You must be exhausted." He glanced down at her small bundle. "Is this all your luggage?" Heat flooded Delilah's cheeks, and she wanted to lie, to make up some story about trunks that would arrive later, but she had never been good at deception. "Yes, this is everything." She waited for him to say something about it, to make some comment about her obvious poverty, but he simply nodded. "Then we can head straight to the ranch. It is about an hour's ride outside the city. I have a wagon waiting." He paused, studying her face. "Have you eaten today?" The question surprised her. "I had some bread this morning." That was hours ago. It was not quite a reprimand, more an observation. "There is a cafe just down the street. Let me buy you a proper meal before we head out." "You do not have to do that." Delilah's pride flared, even as her stomach twisted with hunger. "I am fine." Warren's eyes met hers, and there was understanding there, but also firmness. "Miss Chandler, I asked you to travel across the country to marry me and help me build a life. The least I can do is make sure you are fed. Please." There was no judgment in his voice, no pity, just practical kindness, and that made all the difference. Delilah found herself nodding, and Warren gestured for her to walk with him down the boardwalk. He did not offer his arm, which she appreciated since it would have drawn more attention to her ragged appearance, but he stayed close enough that his presence felt protective. The cafe was small but clean, with checkered curtains and the smell of coffee and fresh bread. The woman behind the counter, a plump matron with flour on her apron, smiled at Warren. "Good to see you, Mr. Oakley. The usual." "2 orders, please, Mrs. Patterson, and coffee." They sat at a small table by the window, and Delilah tried not to stare at the other patrons, tried not to feel self-conscious about the state of her dress. Warren removed his hat and set it on the chair beside him. In the better light of the cafe, Delilah could see that his face was honest and open, with laugh lines around his eyes and a mouth that looked like it smiled often, though he was serious now. "I want to be straight with you, Miss Chandler," he said, folding his hands on the table. "I know this situation is not what either of us might have chosen under different circumstances. You answered my advertisement because you needed security, and I placed it because I needed help. That is honest, at least." Delilah appreciated his directness. "Yes, but I want you to know something." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "I do not judge you for the state of your clothes or the fact that you arrived with next to nothing. Life can be hard, and circumstances can change through no fault of our own. What matters to me is not what you are wearing, but who you are as a person. Clothes do not make a woman. Character does." The words settled over Delilah like a warm blanket, and to her horror, she felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back quickly, but not before Warren noticed. He did not comment on them, just waited patiently while she collected herself. "Thank you," she managed finally. "You do not know how much I needed to hear that." Mrs. Patterson arrived with plates of roast beef, potatoes, carrots, and thick slices of bread with butter. It was more food than Delilah had seen in months, and her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her fork. She forced herself to eat slowly, to not gulp it down like a starving animal, though that was exactly how she felt. Warren ate steadily, giving her time to adjust, and when he spoke again, his tone was conversational. "My ranch is small but growing. I have about 200 head of cattle right now, and I hope to expand. The house is nothing fancy, just 3 rooms, but it is solid and dry. There is a creek that runs through the property, good water year-round. The work is hard, but the land is good." "What would you need me to do?" Delilah asked between bites. "Cooking, cleaning, mending, helping with the garden and the chickens. During branding and roundup, I will need you to help with meals for the hands I hire. Nothing you would not expect from running a household." He paused. "I should also tell you that I have a younger brother, Wesley. He is 22 and helps me run the ranch. He lives in the bunkhouse most of the time, but he takes meals with us. He is a good man, though a bit wild yet." "Does he know about me?" "He knows I sent for a mail-order bride, yes. He thinks I am crazy, but he will be respectful." Warren's mouth quirked in something that might have been amusement. He just does not understand why any man would want to settle down when there are so many adventures to be had. Delilah found herself relaxing slightly. There was something steady and reassuring about Warren Oakley, something that made her feel that perhaps this gamble might not be such a terrible mistake after all. He was not handsome in the conventional sense, not like the smooth-talking merchants who had courted her before her father died, but there was strength in him and honesty, and those qualities suddenly seemed far more valuable than a pretty face. When they finished eating, Warren paid Mrs. Patterson and led Delilah to where he had left his wagon. It was a sturdy farm wagon pulled by two good horses, with a bench seat and a wagon bed that currently held supplies. Warren helped her up onto the seat, his hand warm and calloused against hers, and then climbed up beside her. He released the brake and clicked to the horses, and they started moving through the busy streets of San Francisco. The city gave way gradually to rolling hills covered in golden grass, and the air grew cleaner, scented with wild sage and the distant salt of the ocean. Delilah watched the landscape change, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. There was space here, room to breathe, so different from the crowded tenement where she had spent her last few months in Ohio, sharing a room with 6 other girls and working 14-hour days in a laundry to earn enough for her passage west. "Tell me about your family," Warren said, breaking the comfortable silence. Delilah hesitated, then decided that honesty was the best approach. "My mother died when I was 12. My father raised me on our farm, taught me everything about running a household and working the land. He died 6 months ago of fever, and there were debts I did not know about. The bank took the farm." She swallowed hard. "I had nowhere to go and no way to earn a decent living, so when I saw your advertisement, it seemed like providence." "I am sorry about your father," Warren said simply. "Losing a parent is hard. Did you lose yours?" "My mother died giving birth to Wesley. My father raised us until 3 years ago when he was killed in a stampede, left me the ranch and the responsibility of finishing raising my brother." There was old pain in Warren's voice, but also acceptance. "We do what we have to do." "Yes," Delilah agreed softly. "We do." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking and the horses' hooves creating a steady rhythm against the dirt road. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky, painting the hills in shades of gold and amber. It was beautiful country, wild and open, and Delilah felt something stir in her chest that might have been hope. "There," Warren said finally, pointing ahead. "That is the ranch." Delilah looked where he indicated and saw a small valley with a creek running through it, just as he had described. There was a house, a barn, a few outbuildings and corrals where cattle grazed. It was modest, but it looked well-maintained, and smoke rose from the chimney, indicating someone was inside. As they drew closer, a man emerged from the barn. He was younger than Warren, with the same dark hair but a leaner build and a restless energy in the way he moved. This had to be Wesley. He watched the wagon approach with undisguised curiosity, his eyes widening slightly when he got a good look at Delilah. Warren pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down, then came around to help Delilah. Wesley sauntered over, thumbs hooked in his belt, and Delilah could see the family resemblance in the shape of his face, though his expression was more skeptical than his brother's. "Wesley, this is Miss Delilah Chandler," Warren said formally. "Miss Chandler, my brother Wesley Oakley." "Madam," Wesley said, touching the brim of his hat, but his eyes were taking in every detail of her appearance, and Delilah could see the questions forming. "Pleased to meet you," Delilah said, lifting her chin. She would not apologize for her appearance or her circumstances. Warren had already told her that character mattered more than clothes, and she would hold onto that. "Wesley, help me unload these supplies," Warren said. and there was a note of command in his voice that had his younger brother moving immediately while the men worked. Delilah stood awkwardly by the wagon, unsure what to do. A moment later, Warren called to her. "Go on inside and make yourself at home. I will be in shortly to show you around properly." The house was small but solidly built, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, and 2 doors leading to what must be bedrooms. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was surprisingly clean for a bachelor household. There was a cook stove, a table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, and shelves lined with dishes and supplies. The floor was wood planks, swept clean, and there were even curtains at the windows, though they looked like they had been hung by someone who did not quite know what they were doing. Delilah set her small bundle on the table and walked slowly around the room, taking it all in. This would be her home now, if she and Warren could make their arrangement work. It was more than she had dared hope for just a few weeks ago, when she had been facing the very real possibility of ending up on the streets. The door opened and Warren came in, followed by Wesley carrying a crate of supplies. Warren gestured to one of the bedroom doors. "That is my room. The other is yours. I thought you would want privacy while we get to know each other." Delilah felt relief wash over her. She had not known what to expect in terms of the marriage arrangement, whether Warren would insist on his rights as a husband immediately or if he would give her time. This answered that question, at least for now. "Thank you," she said. "That is very considerate." Wesley set down the crate and looked between them, then shook his head slightly, a smile playing at his lips. "Well, I will leave you 2 to get settled. Welcome to the ranch, Miss Chandler." After Wesley left, Warren showed Delilah around properly. Her room was small but adequate, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a washstand. The window looked out over the valley, and late afternoon light streamed through, making the space feel warm and welcoming. "I know it is not much," Warren said from the doorway, "but you can fix it up however you like. And tomorrow, we will go into town and get you some proper clothes and supplies. You will need work dresses and boots that do not have holes in them." Delilah turned to face him, alarmed. "I cannot let you spend money on me like that. I have no way to pay you back." "You are going to be my wife," Warren said firmly. "You will earn your keep by running this household and helping me build this ranch into something prosperous. That is payment enough. Besides, you cannot work in boots that are falling apart. It is practical, not charity." There was a difference between the two, Delilah knew, and Warren seemed to understand that her pride needed the distinction. She nodded slowly. "All right, thank you." Warren nodded toward the main room. "I will start supper. You rest for a bit. I know you are tired." But Delilah shook her head. "I would rather help if you do not mind. I want to start learning how you like things done." Something warm flickered in Warren's eyes and he smiled. "All right then. Come on." They worked together in the kitchen, and Delilah found that Warren was a competent cook, probably out of necessity. He showed her where things were kept and explained his routine. Wesley joined them for supper, and the conversation was easy, mostly about the ranch and the work that needed doing. Wesley told stories about ornery cattle and a horse that refused to be broken, and Delilah found herself laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in months. As the evening wore on and exhaustion finally caught up with her, Delilah excused herself and retreated to her small room. She washed as best she could with the water in the basin, then lay down on the bed in her worn chemise, too tired even to properly appreciate the luxury of a mattress after weeks of sleeping on stagecoach benches and cheap boarding house cots. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found a place where she could belong. Morning came early on a ranch. Delilah woke to the sound of roosters crowing and men's voices outside. For a moment, she was disoriented, not remembering where she was, and then it all came rushing back. She was in California at Warren Oakley's ranch, beginning a new life. She dressed quickly in her ragged gray dress, the only one she owned, and braided her hair as neatly as she could without a mirror. When she emerged from her room, she found Warren already up, working at the stove. "Good morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Delilah admitted. "What can I do to help?" "I am almost done with breakfast, but you can set the table." They fell into an easy rhythm, and when Wesley came in from the barn, they all sat down to eggs, bacon, and biscuits. The food was simple but filling, and Delilah made mental notes about how Warren cooked things, what supplies he had on hand, what might need to be added or changed. After breakfast, Warren announced that they would go into town. "We need to get you properly outfitted. Wesley can handle things here for a few hours." The ride back to San Francisco was pleasant in the morning light, and Warren pointed out landmarks and neighbors' properties along the way. He talked about his plans for the ranch, his hopes for breeding better cattle, his dreams of building a larger house someday when he could afford it. Delilah listened, asking questions, offering observations, and she could see Warren warming to her interest, his expression growing more animated. In town, Warren took her to a dry goods store run by a cheerful woman named Mrs. Henderson. Warren explained the situation simply. "Miss Chandler needs a complete wardrobe, work dresses, a good Sunday dress, undergarments, boots, a proper coat, whatever she needs." Mrs. Henderson looked Delilah up and down with a practiced eye and nodded. "I can help with that. You go take care of your other errands, Mr. Oakley. This will take a while." Warren hesitated, then addressed Delilah. "Will you be all right here? I have some business at the feed store and the bank." "I will be fine," Delilah assured him. After Warren left, Mrs. Henderson led Delilah to the back of the store where ready-made dresses hung on racks and bolts of fabric lined the walls. "So you are Warren Oakley's mail-order bride," she said, not unkindly. "The whole town has been talking about it." "He is a good man, that one, honest and hard-working." "He seems to be," Delilah said carefully. "You are lucky to have found him." Mrs. Henderson pulled out several dresses in practical calico and sturdy cotton. "These are the best for ranch work. They will wear well and wash easily. Now, let us get your measurements. Over the next hour, Mrs. Henderson outfitted Delilah with 3 work dresses in different colors. A nicer dress in dark blue for church and town visits. New undergarments including a proper corset and petticoats, sturdy boots, a warm coat, a shawl, and even a new bonnet. Delilah tried not to think about how much it all cost, tried not to feel guilty about Warren's generosity. "Now," Mrs. Henderson said when they were done, "you should change into one of the new dresses. No offense, dear, but that old one has seen better days." Delilah agreed and changed into a simple brown calico dress with white collar and cuffs. It fit well, and when she looked at herself in the small mirror Mrs. Henderson provided, she barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked respectable again, like someone with a place in the world. When Warren returned and saw her, he stopped in his tracks, and something flickered across his face too quickly for Delilah to identify. "You look nice," he said simply, but there was warmth in his voice that made her cheeks flush. They loaded all her new things into the wagon, and Warren made one more stop at the general store for food supplies. The proprietor, a gruff man named Mr. Chen, greeted Warren like an old friend and eyed Delilah with curiosity, but no judgment. On the ride back to the ranch, Delilah felt different, lighter somehow. The new clothes helped, but it was more than that. It was the way Warren treated her, with respect and kindness, as if her opinion mattered. It was the sense that she had value beyond just what she could do or how she looked. "Warren," she said as they neared the ranch, "I want you to know how grateful I am for all of this, for seeing past my appearance when I arrived and giving me a chance." Warren glanced at her, and in the afternoon sunlight his eyes were the warm amber of honey. "Delilah, I meant what I said yesterday. What you wore, what you owned, none of that matters to me. What matters is that you were brave enough to travel across the country alone, to take a chance on a stranger, to start over. That takes character. That takes strength. Those are the qualities I value in a person, and those are the qualities I see in you." Delilah felt something shift in her chest, something that might have been the beginning of affection for this man who saw her so clearly. "Thank you," she said softly. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Delilah rose early and made breakfast for the men, then spent her days cleaning, cooking, mending, and learning the rhythms of ranch life. Warren was patient, showing her how to milk the cow, how to collect eggs without startling the hens, how to make cheese and butter, how to preserve vegetables from the garden. He worked long hours, but he always made time to check on her, to ask how she was doing, to show appreciation for her efforts. Wesley was friendly but distant, clearly still skeptical about the whole arrangement. Delilah did not take it personally. She understood that he saw her as an interloper, someone who might change the dynamics of the household he had known his whole life. One afternoon, about a week after Delilah's arrival, Warren came in from the range earlier than usual. Delilah was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough, and she looked up in surprise when the door opened. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Everything is fine," Warren assured her. He removed his hat and hung it on the peg by the door, then came to stand by the table where she worked. "I was thinking that we should talk about our arrangement." Delilah's hands stilled in the dough, and she looked up at him. "All right." Warren pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. She wiped her hands on her apron and took the seat across from him, her heart beating faster. Was he unhappy with her work? Had he changed his mind about the marriage? "You have been here almost 2 weeks now," Warren began, "and I wanted to check in with you, see how you are feeling about everything." "I am feeling good," Delilah said honestly. "This is more than I ever hoped for. You have been very kind, and I hope I am holding up my end of the bargain." "You are doing more than that," Warren said. "The house has never been this clean, and the food is better than anything Wesley and I could ever manage, but that is not really what I am asking about." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I want to know if you are happy. Or at least, if you think you could be happy here." The question surprised Delilah. Happiness had not been something she had considered when she agreed to this arrangement. Survival, security, respectability, yes, but happiness? That had seemed like an impossible luxury. "I think I could be," she said slowly. "I like the work, and I like the land, and I like you." She felt her cheeks heat at the admission, but it was true. In the past 2 weeks, she had come to genuinely respect and appreciate Warren Oakley. He was steady and kind, hardworking and honest. He treated her as an equal, asked her opinions, and listened when she spoke. Those qualities were rarer than gold in Delilah's experience. Warren's face softened, and he reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand, as if asking permission. Delilah closed the distance, placing her flour-dusted hand in his calloused one. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "I like you too," Warren said quietly. "More than I expected to, if I am being honest. When I placed that advertisement, I was looking for practical help, someone to share the work. I was not expecting to actually like the person who answered. But I do. I like your strength and your practicality. I like how you laugh at Wesley's terrible jokes and how you hum when you cook." I like that you are not afraid of hard work and that you have opinions about how things should be done. Delilah's breath caught in her throat. Warren, I know we agreed to take things slow, he continued, and I am not trying to rush you into anything. But I wanted you to know that I am not just looking at this as a business arrangement anymore. I am starting to hope that maybe, over time, this could become a real marriage, a partnership built on respect and maybe even affection. I would like that, Delilah whispered. I would like that very much. Warren smiled, a real smile that lit up his whole face and made him suddenly, breathtakingly handsome. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, and Delilah felt warmth spread through her entire body. From that day forward, something changed between them. The formality that had marked their early interactions gave way to something warmer, more comfortable. They began to talk more freely, sharing stories about their childhoods, their hopes for the future, their fears and dreams. Warren told her about his father, a stern but loving man who had taught him everything about ranching. Delilah told him about her mother, who had been beautiful and kind and had died far too young. Wesley noticed the change and seemed to relax a bit, as if he had been waiting to see if the marriage would take before committing to accepting Delilah as part of the family. He started joking with her, teasing her gently about her cooking or her attempts to learn to ride a horse, and Delilah gave as good as she got, which seemed to earn his respect. 3 weeks after Delilah's arrival, Warren suggested they make their arrangement official. We should get married properly, he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. I know we have been living as if we are married, but I want to do it right. I want to stand up in front of God and the community and promise to be your husband. I would like that, Delilah said, and she meant it. What had started as a practical arrangement had grown into something real, something precious, and she wanted to formalize it properly. They married the following Sunday in the small church in town, with Wesley standing up as best man and Mrs. Henderson from the dry goods store serving as witness. Delilah wore her blue dress and Warren wore his best suit, and when they stood before the minister and made their vows, Delilah felt tears slip down her cheeks. These were not tears of sadness or fear, but of gratitude and hope. When the minister told Warren he could kiss his bride, Warren cupped Delilah's face gently in his hands and kissed her softly, reverently, as if she were something precious. It was Delilah's first real kiss, and it made her head spin and her heart race. Afterward, several of the townspeople congratulated them, and Mrs. Henderson hugged Delilah tightly. You have got yourself a good man, she whispered. Be happy, dear. That night, after the celebration dinner Wesley had insisted on making, Warren carried Delilah over the threshold of his bedroom, which was now their bedroom. He set her down gently and looked at her with such tenderness that Delilah felt her breath catch. I will be gentle, he promised, and he was. He was patient and careful, and while there was some discomfort, there was also sweetness and intimacy that Delilah had never imagined. Afterward, as she lay in Warren's arms, his heart beat steady beneath her ear, she thought that she had never felt so safe, so cherished, so completely at home. The months that followed were good ones. Fall turned to winter, and the ranch settled into the slower rhythms of the cold season. Warren and Wesley worked on mending fences and equipment, preparing for spring calving. Delilah kept the house warm and comfortable, cooked hearty meals, and worked on sewing projects in the evenings while Warren read aloud from books or newspapers. She learned more about running the ranch, about cattle and horses, about the business side of things. Warren valued her input and often asked her opinion on decisions he had to make. They were building a true partnership, and Delilah found herself falling deeper in love with her husband with each passing day. One evening in December, as they lay in bed together, Warren's hand resting possessively on her hip. Delilah finally spoke the words that had been building in her heart. "I love you." Warren went very still, and then he rolled over to face her, his eyes searching hers in the lamplight. "Say that again." "I love you, Warren Oakley," Delilah repeated, her voice stronger now. "I did not think I could when I came here. I thought this would just be an arrangement, a practical solution. But you have been so good to me, so kind and patient and respectful. You saw past my ragged clothes and my poverty and gave me a chance to prove myself. You made me feel valuable. How could I not fall in love with you?" Warren pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "God, Delilah, I love you too. I think I started falling for you that first day when you stood there on the boardwalk looking terrified but determined not to show it. You were so brave. You still are." They made love that night with a new tenderness, a new urgency, whispering declarations and promises in the darkness. And when Delilah finally fell asleep in her husband's arms, she knew that she had found something she had thought lost forever: a home, a purpose, and most precious of all, love. Winter passed, and spring arrived with the usual chaos of calving season. Delilah learned to help with the newborn calves, bottle-feeding the ones whose mothers could not nurse them, staying up through the night when necessary. It was exhausting work, but she found satisfaction in it, in being truly useful, truly needed. Wesley became a real friend during those long nights, the two of them trading stories and jokes as they tended the animals. He told her that he was glad Warren had sent for her, that he had never seen his brother so happy. "He was always so serious before," Wesley said one night as they sat in the barn, a sleeping calf curled at their feet. "After Pa died, it was like all the lightness went out of him. He just worked and worried and worked some more, but you brought something back. You made him remember how to smile." "He did the same for me," Delilah said softly. "I was so lost before I came here, I did not know if I would even survive. But Warren gave me a chance, and more than that, he gave me respect. He saw me as a person, not just as someone in ragged clothes." Wesley nodded. "That is Warren. He has always been able to see what matters, character over appearance, substance over flash. It is why he is so good at judging cattle, too." He grinned. "He can see the quality in an animal even when it does not look like much." Delilah laughed. "Are you comparing me to a cow?" "A very nice cow," Wesley said, and they both dissolved into laughter. As spring turned to summer, Delilah began to suspect she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses stopped, and she felt tired and queasy in the mornings. She waited to be sure before telling Warren, but one evening as they sat together on the porch watching the stars come out, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "I think we are going to have a baby," she said quietly. Warren's hand stilled, and then he turned to her, his eyes wide. "Are you sure?" "Not completely, but all the signs are there." Warren let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and begging him to put her down. When he finally did, he kissed her thoroughly, and when he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. "A baby," he whispered. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Delilah asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Warren said. "You have given me so much, Delilah. A home, a partnership, love, and now a child. I cannot believe how lucky I am." "We are both lucky," Delilah corrected. "I could have ended up anywhere with anyone, but I found you." The pregnancy progressed well, though Delilah found herself exhausted and occasionally sick. Warren was endlessly solicitous, taking over more of the housework, insisting she rest, bringing her ginger tea for the nausea. Wesley was both excited and terrified at the prospect of becoming an uncle, and he started working on building a cradle in his spare time. In late January of 1871, during a cold spell that frosted the grass and made the water in the basins ice over, Delilah went into labor. Warren sent Wesley racing to town to fetch the doctor and the midwife, and then he stayed by Delilah's side, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Delilah was sure she could not do it, could not endure another contraction. But Warren never left her side, never stopped encouraging her, and when their son finally arrived with a loud, healthy cry, Warren wept openly. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, placing the baby in Delilah's arms. "A big, healthy boy." Delilah looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and the dark fuzz of hair on his head, and felt a love so fierce and overwhelming that it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. Warren leaned over them both, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Delilah." They named him William after Warren's father, and he became the center of their world. Warren was a devoted father, coming in from the range multiple times a day just to check on his son, holding him in the evenings while Delilah prepared supper, singing him lullabies in a surprisingly good voice. Wesley was equally smitten, declaring himself William's favorite uncle and spending hours making faces at the baby to try to coax out smiles. The ranch felt fuller, warmer, more like a real home with the sound of a baby's cries and laughter echoing through it. As William grew from infant to toddler, Delilah found herself more content than she had ever thought possible. The work was still hard, the days still long, but she was surrounded by love. Warren continued to be an attentive, affectionate husband, and their partnership grew stronger with each passing year. When William was 2, Delilah found herself pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter, Daisy, was born in the spring of 1873, a tiny, delicate thing with her mother's auburn hair and her father's amber eyes. William was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Warren was just as devoted to his daughter as he had been to his son. The ranch prospered as well. With Delilah managing the household so efficiently, Warren and Wesley were able to focus more on breeding and selling cattle. They expanded their herd, bought more land, and began to build a reputation for quality stock. The little 3-room house grew too small, and Warren began planning for a larger one. In 1875, construction began on a new house with 6 rooms, including a proper parlor and separate bedrooms for the children. It was built on a rise overlooking the creek, with a wide porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sun set over their land. The day they moved into the new house, Warren carried Delilah over the threshold again, just as he had on their wedding night 6 years earlier. She laughed and kissed him, and when he set her down, they stood together in the empty parlor and marveled at how far they had come. "You remember the day I arrived?" Delilah asked, leaning against Warren's chest. "I was so scared, standing there in my ragged dress, sure you would send me away." "I remember," Warren said, his arms tightening around her. "I remember thinking that you were the bravest person I had ever met. You had lost everything, but you were still standing, still fighting. That is when I knew you were special." "You saved me," Delilah said softly. "You looked past my clothes and my circumstances and saw me, really saw me. You told me that clothes do not make a woman, character does. Those words changed my life." "You saved me too," Warren said. "I was so lonely before you came, just going through the motions. You brought light and laughter back into my life. You gave me a family, a real home. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to you." They stood there together, holding each other in their new house, surrounded by the life they had built together. Outside, they could hear William and Daisy playing, their laughter ringing out clear and bright. Wesley was working in the barn, whistling a cheerful tune. The cattle lowed in the distance, and the creek burbled over its stones. It was everything Delilah had never dared to dream of, and it was real. It was hers. She had arrived in California in rags, with nothing to her name and no reason to hope. But she had found a man who valued character over appearances, who saw strength where others saw poverty, who offered respect where others offered pity. Warren Oakley had given her a chance, and together they had built something beautiful. A ranch, a family, a love that grew deeper and stronger with every passing year. It had not always been easy. There had been hard times, lean years when the cattle prices dropped and they had to scrimp and save. There had been illnesses and accidents, fears and worries. But they had faced it all together, and that had made all the difference. As the years continued to pass, the Oakley Ranch became one of the most respected in the region. Warren's reputation for honesty and quality spread, and buyers came from as far away as Nevada to purchase his cattle. Wesley eventually married a spirited young woman named Sarah, and they built their own house on the property, raising their own children alongside William and Daisy. The family gathered often for meals and celebrations, and the Oakley Ranch became known for its hospitality. Delilah, now a prosperous rancher's wife, never forgot where she had come from. She was always the first to offer help to newcomers in the area, especially young women who had come west seeking a better life. She knew what it was like to arrive with nothing, to be judged by appearances, and she made sure that no one who came to her door was ever turned away hungry or in need. Warren watched his wife's generosity with pride, knowing that her character, the very thing he had recognized in her that first day, was what made her truly remarkable. The ragged dress and worn boots had meant nothing. The strength, courage, and kindness that had brought her across the country to take a chance on a stranger, those were the qualities that had built their life together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Warren surprised Delilah with a gift. It was a beautiful dress made of green silk, far finer than anything she had ever owned. She was touched by the gesture but told him it was too extravagant. "You deserve beautiful things," Warren said, fastening the tiny buttons up her back. "You always have. But the truth is, you would be just as beautiful in the ragged gray dress you arrived in, because your beauty comes from who you are, not what you wear." Delilah turned in his arms and kissed him deeply. "And you are the man who saw that from the very beginning, who looked at a woman in rags and saw someone worth knowing, worth respecting, worth loving. That is your gift, Warren. You see people as they truly are." "I saw you," Warren said simply, "and I loved what I saw." They went to the church social that night, Delilah in her fine green dress and Warren in his best suit, and they danced together while their children played with the other youngsters. People complimented Delilah on her dress, but what she remembered most about that night was the way Warren looked at her, with love and admiration and pride, the same way he had looked at her in her ragged clothes 10 years earlier, because Warren had been right. Clothes did not make a woman. Character did, and Delilah Chandler Oakley had character in abundance, forged in hardship, strengthened by love, and proven every day in the life she lived and the family she nurtured. More children came in the following years. Another son, Thomas, and then twin girls, Emma and Alina. The house that had seemed so spacious when they built, it began to feel crowded again. But it was a good kind of crowded, full of laughter and love and the chaos of family life. Warren's hair began to gray at the temples, and Delilah found lines appearing around her eyes, but they wore the marks of time with pride. Each line was a memory, each gray hair a story. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and built something that would last beyond their own lives. Wesley and Sarah had 4 children of their own, and the cousins grew up together, working the ranch side by side, learning the values that Warren and Delilah exemplified. Hard work, honesty, kindness, and the understanding that a person's worth was not measured by their wealth or appearance but by their character and actions. On warm summer evenings, the extended family would gather on the porch of the big house, and Warren would tell stories about the old days. He loved to talk about how Delilah had arrived in rags, looking terrified but determined, and how he had known instantly that she was exactly the woman he needed. "Your mother arrived with nothing but a small bundle and 50 cents, he would tell the children, but she was rich in all the ways that mattered. She had courage and strength and a good heart. Those things are worth more than all the gold in California." The children loved these stories, and Delilah would sit beside Warren, her hand in his, and marvel at how much her life had changed. From a desperate woman facing an uncertain future to a beloved wife and mother, from poverty to prosperity, from loneliness to a life overflowing with love and family. But the real transformation had not been in her circumstances. It had been in her understanding of her own worth. Warren had given her that gift on the very first day, when he had looked at her in her ragged clothes and said that character mattered more than appearances. He had seen her value when she had almost forgotten it herself, and that recognition had given her the strength to become the woman she was meant to be. In the spring of 1885, Warren and Delilah celebrated their 16th wedding anniversary with a party that drew neighbors from miles around. The ranch was thriving, their children were healthy and happy, and they were surrounded by community and love. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Warren took Delilah's hand and led her away from the house, down to the creek where they had walked so many times over the years. The spring air was soft and sweet, and the water sang over the stones. "I have been thinking," Warren said as they stood together watching the sunset, "about all the things that had to happen to bring us together. Your father's death, the loss of your farm, my decision to send for a mail-order bride. Individually, those things were tragedies or desperate measures, but together they brought us to each other. They gave us this life. I used to wonder why God let my father die," Delilah said quietly. "Why he let me lose everything. But I do not wonder anymore. I think sometimes we have to lose everything before we can find what we were always meant to have. I had to become desperate enough to take a chance on a stranger, and you had to be lonely enough to reach out to someone you had never met." "I would do it all again," Warren said, turning to face her. "Every hardship, every lonely night if it meant ending up here with you." "So would I," Delilah whispered. And when Warren kissed her there by the creek in the fading light, she felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt on their wedding day 16 years earlier. They walked back to the house hand in hand, to the home they had built together, filled with the children they had raised and the love they had nurtured. The house that had started as a simple 3-room cabin had grown into something grand, but it was not the size or the furnishings that made it a home. It was the people inside, the family that Warren and Delilah had created through their partnership and their love. Years continued to pass, as they always do. The children grew into adults and began to make their own ways in the world. William took over more of the ranch operations, learning the business from his father with the same patience Warren had shown Delilah all those years ago. Daisy married a banker from San Francisco and moved to the city, though she visited often with her own growing family. Thomas showed a talent for horses and began breeding them alongside the cattle operation. The twins, Emma and Alina, were inseparable and both married brothers from a neighboring ranch, staying close to home. Wesley's children likewise grew and flourished, and the Oakley Ranch became a true family enterprise, with multiple generations working together toward common goals. The values that Warren and Delilah had instilled, the importance of character over appearance, of treating people with respect regardless of their circumstances, became the foundation of the family legacy. Delilah continued her charitable work, and the Oakley Ranch became known as a place where people in need could find help. Drifters were fed, struggling families were given employment, and young women with nowhere to go were offered work and safety. Delilah never turned anyone away, because she remembered what it was like to stand on the edge of desperation with nowhere left to turn. One day, a young woman arrived at the ranch much as Delilah had, in ragged clothes with a small bundle of possessions. She was answering an advertisement that William had placed, looking for household help now that his own family was growing. Delilah answered the door and saw her younger self in the girl's frightened eyes and determined chin. "Come in," Delilah said warmly, taking the girl's hand. "You are safe here. What is your name?" "Margaret, madam," the girl said softly. "I know I do not look like much, but I am a hard worker and I am honest." "I can see that," Delilah said, and she meant it. She could see past the ragged dress to the strength beneath, the same way Warren had seen her so many years ago. "Character matters more than appearances, Margaret. Always remember that." She brought Margaret into the kitchen and gave her food and water, then introduced her to William and his wife. As she watched William interview the girl, she saw him display the same kindness and respect that his father had shown Delilah. The lessons had been passed down, the values preserved. That evening, Delilah told Warren about Margaret. They were sitting on the porch as they did most evenings, watching the sun set over their land, and Delilah's head rested on Warren's shoulder. "She reminded me of myself when I first arrived," Delilah said. "So scared but trying not to show it, so desperate for a chance." "And you gave it to her," Warren said, kissing the top of her head, "just as I gave it to you." "We have been very blessed," Delilah said softly. "When I think about how different my life could have been if you had judged me by my ragged clothes, if you had sent me away because I did not look like what you expected, it terrifies me." "I could never have sent you away," Warren said. "From the moment I saw you standing there with your chin up and your eyes blazing, I knew you were special. The clothes did not matter. They never mattered." They sat in comfortable silence, these two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life of love and purpose. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and somewhere in the house, they could hear their grandchildren laughing. In 1895, Warren and Delilah celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary, and the whole family gathered for a massive celebration. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, 3 generations of Oakleys filling the house and spilling out onto the lawn. Food covered every surface, and music and laughter filled the air. Warren stood up to make a speech, and the crowd quieted to listen. "26 years ago," he began, "a woman stepped off a stagecoach wearing a ragged dress and carrying everything she owned in a small cloth bundle. I took one look at her and thought, there is my wife, not because of how she looked, but because of what I saw in her eyes. Strength, courage, determination, and a good heart. I told her that day that clothes do not make a woman, character does, and I have spent the past 26 years watching her prove that truth every single day." He turned to Delilah, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You have given me everything, Delilah. A home, a family, a purpose, and a love deeper than I ever imagined possible. You have been my partner, my best friend, my greatest blessing. And I want everyone here to know that if I had my life to live over, I would not change a single thing, as long as it meant ending up here with you." Delilah stood and went to her husband, and he pulled her into his arms as their children and grandchildren cheered and applauded. She looked around at all the faces, at the family they had created, at the legacy of love and respect they had built, and she felt her heart overflow with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to Warren, "for seeing me, for choosing me, for loving me. Thank you for teaching me that my worth was not dependent on my circumstances, but on who I was inside. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher who did not know what he was missing until you arrived," Warren whispered back. They kissed, and the crowd erupted in cheers again, and Delilah thought about how much had changed since that September day in 1869 when she had stepped off the stagecoach in her ragged dress, terrified and desperate and hoping beyond hope that the stranger who had sent for her would give her a chance. Warren Oakley had given her far more than a chance. He had given her a home, a family, respect, and most precious of all, a love that had deepened and matured over 26 years of partnership. He had seen past her poverty to her character, and in doing so, he had shown her how to see her own worth. The years that followed continued to be good ones. Warren and Delilah grew old together, their love never diminishing but rather transforming into something even more precious. A deep companionship built on decades of shared experiences, weathered storms, and celebrated joys. They became the patriarch and matriarch of a large, thriving family, and their home remained a center of warmth and hospitality. In the spring of 1901, as the new century dawned, Warren fell ill. It started as a simple cold but developed into pneumonia, and despite the best efforts of doctors and the devoted nursing of his family, he grew weaker. Delilah sat by his bedside day and night, holding his hand and talking to him, reminding him of all their years together, all the memories they had made. "You remember the day we met?" she asked him one evening as the light faded outside the window. "You told me that clothes do not make a woman, character does. You saved my life that day, Warren. You gave me back my sense of worth." Warren's eyes, still that warm amber even in his illness, focused on her face. "You saved mine too," he said, his voice weak but clear. "You brought love and light into my life. You made everything worth it." "I love you," Delilah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I have loved you since the day you looked at me in my ragged clothes and saw someone worth knowing." "I love you too," Warren said. "Always have, always will." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Delilah Chandler Oakley. He fell asleep then, his hand still clasped in hers, and when he took his last breath early the next morning, Delilah was there beside him, just as she had been for 32 years of marriage. The grief was profound, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe, but Delilah did not allow herself to be consumed by it. Warren would not have wanted that. Instead, she focused on the gift he had given her, the life they had built together, the family they had raised, and the love that would endure even beyond death. At Warren's funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives he had touched. Ranchers and townspeople, friends and family, all came to pay their respects to a man who had been known for his honesty, his kindness, and his unwavering integrity. Delilah stood beside the coffin, her children and grandchildren surrounding her, and she spoke about the man she had loved. "Warren Oakley was a man who understood what truly mattered," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "He valued character over appearance, substance over show, kindness over pride. He took a chance on a desperate woman in ragged clothes and gave her a life beyond her wildest dreams. But more than that, he gave her respect, partnership, and love. He saw people for who they truly were, not for what they appeared to be, and that gift of sight, that ability to recognize worth, was his greatest legacy. She paused, looking out at all the faces. He told me once that clothes do not make a woman, character does. That principle guided our life together. It is how we raised our children and how we ran our ranch. It is the foundation of everything we built. And it is the lesson I hope all of you will carry forward. See people as they truly are, value what matters, love deeply and honestly. That is what Warren did, and that is how his memory will live on. After the funeral, Delilah returned to the ranch that she and Warren had built together. Her children wanted her to come live with one of them, but she refused. This was her home, the place where she and Warren had created their life, and she was not ready to leave it. She continued to live there for another 12 years, still offering hospitality to those in need, still serving as the matriarch of the growing Oakley family. Margaret, the girl who had arrived in ragged clothes much as Delilah had, became like a daughter to her, and they worked together to run the household and continue Warren's legacy of generosity. Delilah told her story often, to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, wanting them to understand the importance of character and the danger of judging by appearances. She spoke of arriving in San Francisco in ragged clothes, terrified and desperate, and finding a man who looked past all of that to see her true worth. "Your grandfather saved my life," she would tell them, "but more than that, he taught me to value myself. He showed me that my circumstances did not define me, that my character was what mattered. That is the greatest gift one person can give another, the gift of recognition, of being truly seen and valued for who you are." In the summer of 1913, Delilah died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 68. She was buried next to Warren on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, and the entire county turned out for her funeral. The minister spoke of her generosity, her strength, and her unwavering devotion to her family and community. But it was William, their eldest son, who spoke the words that best captured his mother's legacy. "My mother arrived in California with nothing but a ragged dress and a brave heart," he said. "She could have been defeated by her circumstances, crushed by poverty and loss. But she had character, real strength that came from deep within. My father saw that in her immediately, and he gave her a chance to prove what she was capable of. Together, they built this ranch, raised this family, and created a legacy of love and respect that will endure for generations." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "My father used to say that clothes do not make a woman, character does. My mother lived that truth every day of her life. She taught us to see beyond appearances, to value people for who they are rather than what they have. She showed us that real wealth is not measured in money or possessions, but in love, family, and the positive impact we have on others. That is her legacy, and it is one I am proud to carry forward." The Oakley Ranch continued to thrive under the stewardship of William and his siblings, and then their children, and their children's children. The story of how Warren and Delilah met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, a reminder of the values that had built their family and their fortune. The ragged dress that Delilah had worn when she arrived in San Francisco was preserved, kept in a trunk as a reminder of where the family had come from. Future generations would look at it and try to imagine their elegant, accomplished great-great-grandmother arriving in such poverty. And the story would be told again about how Warren Oakley had looked past the ragged clothes to see the character of the woman beneath. Because that was the truth that endured, the lesson that mattered. Appearances could deceive, circumstances could change, but character was forever. Warren had recognized that truth and had lived it, and Delilah had proven it every day of their life together. They had built something beautiful, Those two people who had come together out of desperation and practicality and had found love. A ranch, a family, a legacy of kindness and integrity that would ripple forward through time, touching lives and changing hearts. And it had all started with a simple act of vision. A man who looked at a woman in ragged clothes and saw not poverty or failure, but strength, courage, and character. Warren Oakley had given Delilah Chandler a chance, and together they had created something extraordinary. Their love story became part of California history, one of those tales that captured the spirit of the Wild West, a time when fortunes could be made or lost in an instant, when people reinvented themselves and found new lives in a new land. But more than that, it was a story about the enduring power of seeing people truly, of valuing character over appearances, and of love that grows from respect and partnership into something deep and lasting. The ranch still stands today, now a historic landmark, and visitors can tour the house where Warren and Delilah raised their family. In the main parlor hangs a portrait of the two of them, painted on their 25th wedding anniversary. Warren sits in a chair, distinguished and handsome despite his gray hair, and Delilah stands beside him, her hand on his shoulder. She wears a beautiful dress of deep blue velvet, but her expression is what captures the attention, a look of contentment and joy and deep, abiding love. But in a place of honor beside that portrait is another frame, and in it is the story written in Delilah's own hand late in her life, telling about her arrival in San Francisco in ragged clothes, and the cowboy who had looked past them to see her character. At the end of the story, in her elegant script, are the words that had defined their life together. Clothes do not make a woman, character does. That is what Warren taught me, and that is what we lived. Our love was built on that foundation, and it never wavered, not through poverty or prosperity, hardship or joy. We saw each other truly, valued each other deeply, and loved each other completely. That is the only thing that matters in the end, the only thing that lasts. Not what we wore or what we owned, but who we were to each other and the life we built together. That is real wealth. That is real love. That is real legacy. And so the story ends as it began, with truth and character, and the understanding that what truly matters in life cannot be measured by appearances or possessions, but by the content of our hearts, the strength of our spirits, and the depth of our love. Warren and Delilah Oakley understood that, lived it, and passed it on, and their legacy endures, a testament to the power of seeing truly and loving deeply, exactly as it should be.